Harry is chair of our governing council, but he's also a Forbes columnist, and he's got quite a lot to say about that integration across all the different roles in an organization. But Harry, from your perspective, in terms of this integration across the roles.
No, I think it's great, and I love Marty's answer and Mervyn's sort of rendition of how the corporation has evolved over time and sort of addressing this question of where is the value. And it strikes me from a very pragmatic sort of day-to-day business sense, where does this land within the C-suite or the executive part, and where does it land within the board? And there's been obviously a tremendous growth of the appointments of chief sustainability officers in corporations. And the question that I've been wrestling with is, what is actually their role, and how integrated are they into decision-making and operational and investment decisions within the company? And I think the role has actually not been well defined. It varies across companies. And even where there are, very well-known people who have taken on this role, the question in my mind, having spoken with a lot of executives, is, to be frank, how seriously are they taken in terms of actual decision-making, and how integrated are their responsibilities in investment decisions and hiring decisions and all kinds of things. And so this Forbes column that you mentioned, Carolyn of mine, I went out on a limb and said, maybe the chief sustainability officer should be seen as the integrator in chief. If we really mean seriously what sustainability ought to be within a corporation, it seems to me that that's not, frankly, way out on a limb, that someone needs to sort of weave together the financial, the non-financial, and do it in such a way that is communicated with all the stakeholders of the company, not just the workers and not just the investors, but the communities and so forth. And by the same token, I think the question arises in my mind is, what's the role of the board in sustainability? And we're beginning to see boards of, particularly of public companies, to some extent, creating sustainability committees. I would argue that that's also not too far out on a limb. And if we're really going to take what we've been talking about seriously, the question is, how are we organized within the C-suite and within the boardrooms? And I don't think enough attention has been paid to this. And I think how they are organized and what roles these people take in decision-making, to me, is a litmus test as to how seriously these organizations are actually taking sustainability. That really is where the rubber meets the road. And I think we have a lot of work to do across the world on this particular question.
Harry, you're correct, because it's been proven in practice. When we formed the IRC, so I'm going back some 12, 13 years ago, and sitting having a cup of tea at Fortnum and Mason in Piccadilly in London, having left St. James's Palace, where Liz Charles blessed us for creating the IRC, we had a discussion. And the discussion was, these were some of the founder members of the IRC. And the discussion was, do you start integrated thinking and hope seamlessly you start to do an integrated report? Or does the board say, we are going to do an integrated report? And everybody then starts putting in and thinking on an integrated basis. And what we found, in reality, what happened was, it has to come from the top. The board has to say, we are doing an integrated report. Obviously, the reporting is extraordinarily important, but it's actually the operational decisions that are taken, right? We can have great reports. We can collect data and do all the things that we're all, want to do and are doing. But the question is, who's making the decisions about where the firm is investing in a new plant, and how is it being done in a way that comports with actually what they're reporting? Yeah. And that's where I find that there is a separation of sort of reality and, in fact, the ambition. And the question is, how can we close that gap in a very day-to-day managerial sense? And
you know, as we've just been saying, the rubber meets the road with the board and the C-suite, and you know who they appoint and how much attention they get, and how involved are they in the actual day-to-day decisions.
We need to, you know, connect back up this, you know, the different bits of the business so they actually understand the implications of what they're saying and doing around this. And I think that will make a big difference. But Harry, love your thoughts.
No, I quite agree. I mean, you know, it's interesting that we've come so far in this discussion over the years about, frankly, a silo of financial and non-financial, and frankly, what that has done to some extent is people say, well, the financial is the really important stuff, but the word, you know, the prefix non-financial also is sort of a pejorative term, which I'm trying to overcome in my conversations. But and to that end, I think sort of what I've been saying and what Mervyn and you, Marty, have been saying, and Peter is, you know, we, at least in the United States and in other countries, you know, the SEC, you have to have a qualified financial expert on your board. And we're now moving, there's now been legislation introduced, and SEC just we submitted some formal comments on the proposed rule by the SEC about a qualified cyber expert to be on the board. Now, well, why is it too far a leap to have a qualified sustainability expert on the board as well as a sustainability committee? And I think that's where we need to move to, so that we really, as we've been discussing, really move this integration in a serious kind of way. And I think until companies make that commitment or are obliged to make those kinds of commitments, we still have a long way to go. And so I would say that this is not too far off in the future to expect to have a qualified sustainability expert on the board, and you know, the analog essentially to the chief sustainability officer in the C-suite and a sustainability committee on the board. You know, I think that when we get to that point, I will feel that we've really taken a very significant step.
So while you're on the podium, Harry, here's a question from Damien saying, so what is the view of how boards have changed the makeup of their members over recent times and reflect the new skill sets needed to look at the wider world of ESG impacts of the business?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a question I spend a lot of time discussing in my advisory work with boards, and you know, the fact of the matter is, at least in the States, in the United States, you know, we still have obviously we've created the diversity of boards. You know, the delta in the last 10 years to today has obviously been significant. The question is, what ultimately does diversity mean? And it certainly means gender and race and all those kinds of things. But I think where I'm coming from, it also is a larger lens, and in terms of skill sets and international experience and the like. And it's rare in the United States, to be honest, that you see a truly diversified board along all those different arrays. And I think that is the big challenge. And I'm hoping that in our work in the ESG exchange, you know, we can begin to sort of promote this conversation more forcefully. But I think, as we've been discussing, you know, in this particular panel, we really have to integrate within the company itself and the board itself to take this stuff extraordinarily seriously and put your money where your mouth is.